Good evening. Welcome to the April 11th meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate time to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because most of the board members are participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call. And as always, please note that this meeting is being recorded, as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I will proceed to call the roll of the board members. Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Justin Wood.
Present.
And Prabhu Venkatraman.
I'm here.
Did that work?
David Robbins is here, and Associate Member Maura McCormick.
Here.
Staff with us is Christopher McGoldrick, Town Planner.
Present.
And Natalia Allward.
Present.
Very good. Our first agenda item, as always, is public input. If there is a member of the public present, either in the room or on Zoom, that wishes to speak on a matter that is not already on the board's agenda for tonight, now would be the time to raise your hand and let us know what you want. Seeing none, I will move on to the first action item, which is a draft decision on a request for scenic road approval at 75 Wesson Street. Staff are on the end of the week circulated a draft decision. Does anybody on the board wish to ask a question or comment on that? Anybody?
I do.
Bob.
Yeah. I have a problem with this having been done without a permit, and granting it without some sort of strength in the decision that would preclude others from doing the same thing. We know how people look to previous decisions of the board and say, you did it for them, you should do it for me. So I don't know what we can do. I would like to ask town council about that. How to craft a decision that addresses that. Because otherwise, I think we're opening up basically the end of the scenic road bylaw. I asked by email what other permits were involved in that project and if they had been issued. Do we know?
So I haven't checked on in terms of the septic permit, other permits of that work that was included. And I think it's somewhat difficult, it would be impossible to write a decision that has an effect on future. I think what we could do potentially is include some language in the findings that notes, that this shouldn't be taken as, precedent for future instances, but
I'd like to talk to council.
yep, absolutely. Yeah. Can do that.
So that said, there is no, the issuance of this particular decision is not time critical, as I understand it. So
Not anymore.
No.
So yes, if we can follow up on that and postpone further action on this until the next meeting, or
The septic permit comes from
Board of Health.
Board of Health. Because I think the building department does catch some of this sort of thing when a permit is going through them. But I don't know that the Board of Health has much awareness of other, letting somebody know they need to have a permit before they go ahead or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the Board of Health would necessarily even know for sure that they would need to make an alteration to the stone wall to access the septic system on a property. They just know that there is a septic system there and people need work done, but does that work need the equipment to be brought on, over a wall?
Right. That's part of the conversation. I think I asked about it somewhat last time. Do we, and if we don't, how can we filter this so that it gets caught? Maybe some procedural change, some bylaw change.
So in this instance, part of what we've been looking at, so we have the new online permitting system that does all the building permits via Viewpoint currently. And what we've looked at, what this kind of showed is that, we are looking at an additional check to close the loop in terms of, these types of catching more of these types of, cross departmental issues. Part of the issue in this case is the scope of work was not explicit that the stone wall was going to be moved. And in terms of when it was brought to our attention, that's when we've worked to address it. So, but we're
Yeah.
working to close the loop on some of those things. But
Yeah. What is that system including septic permits?
yes, I believe it does include septic currently.
Then if it can recognize scenic road addresses, at least it could raise a flag that says this is a scenic road, and you may need, actually, I don't know how, well, on a scenic road where there's a stone wall, I don't know how you do very much septic work without opening up the wall. Our own experience was, I don't know how many truckloads of dirt came in.
Yeah, so
They didn't have to go through, we had a driveway that they could use.
so the building permit system is somewhat beholden to the capabilities of that program, which are pretty expansive, but we're still dialing those in and finding these, fine tuning these kinds of things, and we're also limited to the information that's provided by the applicant in developing those programs. So adding additional fields and making sure that we catch this is part of what we're dialing in for that process.
So in the meantime, I still think we ought to ask, talk to council just on this subject and this particular decision.
Yep. And the one thing I noticed as well is that even though this is essentially an after the fact approval decision, most of our prior scenic road ones that involved stone walls have had language in the conditions about hand moving the stone. And I don't want the absence of that in this decision to potentially impact us in the future. I don't think it would, but I think it should still be included somehow.
Yeah, well, we can include that in our conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while we're talking about the scenic roads, we can be aware that the select board is forming a bylaw review committee, and we could put a bug in the ear of the bylaw review committee to contemplate this. I mean, we as a board, we could propose our own amendments to the bylaw, but having the bylaw review committee is sort of a convenient place to put into consideration changes to this and potentially other bylaws, particularly in this case, to add some teeth to it.
Right. This is this is a general bylaw,
It is.
right? Yes. I thought that, I don't think it would have apply. It'd be hard to make it apply as it's written, but I remember from years ago that there was something somewhere in the general bylaws that had a fine, $100 a day or something like that. I don't know that it's ever been applied. But that could be a piece of the conversation.
Yeah, I think questions
If I
about,
remember correctly.
I think over the years, questions about putting more teeth in the general bylaws have arisen from time to time. But for now, we will, I don't know, consider, touching base with council to see to the extent to which this can be written in such a way as to discourage future violations of the same nature. Whether there's any penalty that can be included in this is something to look at for now. Anything else on this? We'll bring this up at the next opportunity after some of these questions have been resolved. And our next and last action item is the review of the decision, the special permit decision at 244 Worcester Street.
So on Friday, I circulated the final draft document for this. Included condition language that was provided. I went through the meeting and rewatched and went through each of the discussion items that we talked about using the language that was discussed in the meeting and added that into this final decision document. So the board did vote to approve this. And at this point, we're looking at making sure that this document is representative of the discussion and the intent of the board. I did have one last comment from when that went out on Friday was Attorney Mark Donahue did suggest language which I think better addresses in section A2 rather than being just the ITE standards, really looking at what, being addressing of the impacts. And let me just pull up that language and I can show where that is.
I'm going to get to that in a little bit anyway. But I want to touch a couple of things before we get there.
Do you want to go first then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if we're going to try to go down and not get lost,
Okay.
we'll get lost. We'll get lost in my little stuff. I'm looking at findings. The beginning paragraph, I noticed we voted to make the following findings based upon compliance with the conditions as recited in this decision, which is good. But then in at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the findings, well, at least in the 1.5.5, a lot of them say based upon the findings. I would feel better if it was the findings and conditions in each case, because I'm not sure that the findings say it's satisfactory if you do something. We say you've got to do something later on in a condition. So I prefer to add in at least in F11, 12, 14, 15, 17, and 18, and perhaps anywhere else in those, and conditions. Findings and conditions. To be even less ambiguous. Also, we find in F3, while we're at it, hours of operation will be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Did we end up with it being that way? Or did we back off of 24/7 for operation?
To the best of my recollection, hours of operation generally were still understood to be 24/7.
Okay.
The restricted hours were for loading and unloading operations. But that, there was the potential for loading and unloading operations to occur during those restricted hours based upon the conditions later on. But yeah, I don't recall that there was ever a
Okay.
restriction to less than 24/7 generally.
Okay. I can't make a positive vote for just the findings on those 1.5.5s. It's got to be I think, findings and conditions. And the other thing, we were just getting to conditions number 2, A2. I'd like next to where the ITE land use codes are mentioned, 150, 151 in particular, we should handle it the same as the 155 and 156 and put, which I think don't the 155 and 166 have the name of the use? I think it would be helpful to people if we could have the names of all those ITE uses as ITE uses them.
Yep, so we can add those in, that's fine.
Yeah.
The language that was proposed and that I think is stronger, frankly, from a condition standpoint, is to include, and I'll just pull that up. So it's, this approval is specifically for a conventional warehouse use as specifically defined by the ITE, under ITE Land Use Code 150 or 151. As noted, we'll add that, those specific in, but we were looking at a conventional warehouse use having a traffic impact generally consistent with the traffic impacts and anticipated by the ITE created by the uses described as Land Use Code 150 and 151. And what that does is, rather than hamstringing us specifically to the ITE, it's really looking at what the concern is, the traffic impact generally consistent. So I think that language is slightly stronger, and I think that
You're saying that leaving out the names for 150 and 151
no,
is stronger than adding them in?
no. So it would include both. So it would be the ITE 150, 151, and we'll add in the general warehouse, and I don't remember specifically what the other 151 was, but adding that language with those references stating that it's the impacts generally anticipated by those rather than specifically those codes.
Right. I'd like to see, and I suppose, let's see, probably 155 and 156 would be helpful too, because not one person in 100 reading this decision will have the slightest idea what those ITE land use codes actually call themselves. So including the words might have a few less people complain at us.
Yes, to be specific, if this information is still current that Justin shared, 150 is warehousing and 151 is mini warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So
About 155 and
those terms
156.
to, you know, put it to add words to what 150 and 151 refer to.
Right.
And I, you
But
know,
what about 155 and 156?
High Cube Fulfillment Center Warehouse and
Mhm.
High Cube Parcel Hub Warehouse.
But I think you could do the same thing with those, couldn't we?
Yeah, those words are sort of in there already. But yeah, maybe more clearly associate those terms with those codes.
Yeah, I think when you put them after the code numbers, you capitalize them.
And
You know, those are actual names out of the ITE, right?
and if you want to go off the deep end, there's
Yes, of
another
course.
ITE code that has traffic characteristics similar to the warehousing and mini warehouse, and that is High Cube Cold Storage Warehouse. But the trips per unit are in the same ballpark as warehouse and mini warehouse. But we don't need to put that in because the language as proposed, traffic characteristics similar to these things, I think that's key. Because it focuses on the traffic impacts, and what we would be saying is, you know, whatever use you're proposing, if the traffic impacts are comparable to 150 and 151, that's sort of included.
Right. We weren't asked for whatever. I didn't get what number you said, but the what high cube frozen.
High Cube Cold Storage, yeah, that's like 150, it's sort of obscure there, but anyway, I don't want to quibble on that. I
Right.
just,
Well, we weren't asked for it,
no,
so we don't have to. What is it? Are the numbers? I looked at this, and I'm pretty sure the numbers for it were down closer to 150 and 151, weren't they?
yes, same ballpark.
So that's probably okay.
But yeah, I think just to stress, it's the point of this condition is that we are approving a warehouse use with traffic characteristics consistent with ITE 150 and 151,
And explicitly not.
and explicitly not the higher traffic with those other
Right.
two identified uses.
Right.
Right.
I'll just say out loud that I'm okay with that proposed new language for the traffic use consistent of. Excuse me. But it does strike me as a little odd just because it is counter to what Mr. Donahue had said when he was proposing this language in the first place, citing ITE land use codes, because he wanted to be very specific to what they were actually looking to use the site for. So that's the thing that makes me just shrug a little bit, wince a little bit at the change, just because it's going a little less ultra specific than what Mr. Donahue had first said.
So
But
I
I'm still okay with
think
that. I just wanted to articulate that.
I think the intent was to have a set criteria when we say generally compatible and have a mutual understanding of something that it can be compared to. I think that general compatibility is stronger from a condition standpoint because that's really what we're looking at in terms of impacts. So I think by using the ITE standards, we have something that's comparable, a common language, if you will, and then generally compatible allows us to have some flexibility in terms of applying that more broadly.
Sounds like we're agreed, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah. In the interest of moving right along. Was there anything else that I interrupted you on that one, Chris?
No, so that was
What
just
more you wanted to say?
that was the one comment that I had in terms of this.
Okay. All right.
The next item I have is on condition 23 under conditions to be met after construction. Anybody have anything before that?
Oh, yes. Standard conditions. Oh, let me see. Get this. I got that. Blah, 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 blah. 10. I have a note on condition 10. we require the submission of an as-built plan prepared by a professional engineer. It doesn't have to be registered. If it is determined upon inspection and blah, blah, and prior to the issuance of, that the subject was not constructed as shown on the approved plan. I guess my question was, why don't we require an as-built anyway?
We will. So the as-built will be used to confirm that the plan was constructed. But typically what this does is it allows the board, if there is anything that's changed, it becomes a modification as needed. And we start that process, but we would require an as-built.
Without further action by the board to determine if it's needed. Okay, well, conditions to be met prior to the start of construction. Number 15. Verify, halfway down, verify that the approved landscaping has been properly installed and remains healthy. How do you do that prior to the start of construction?
Sorry, I'm just reading. Where is this? Where?
I said B, under conditions, B
15.
15. Halfway through the paragraph.
Yes, part of that paragraph reads as something to be, it's sort of, that happens after construction.
Right. Well, but the heading is conditions to be met prior. So this is a condition you have to meet prior to doing it.
So the condition is,
Looking at what's been done before it's done.
so I mean, all of the conditions will be in effect during the entire lifetime of the project. What this is doing is it's looking at prior to construction. We do want to have the landscaping plan being finalized. In terms of the actual verification afterwards, it's
The problem is
obviously we will be doing that during construction or afterwards, but to keep all of the landscaping language together, I think if we can split it out if it's really necessary, but it's
it's an inconsistency. Prior to has been properly reinstalled. Anybody got an idea what to do?
so I think what we can do is then where it starts, the town reserves the right to conduct a site inspection, such and such. We'll just move that to section C, and that becomes condition 16.
Yeah.
Does that address it?
Do you also want to look at the plans before construction starts?
So, yes. So, condition 15 will read, the applicant shall provide a landscaping plan to the planning department for administrative review and approval as presented to the board during the public hearing. Such plan shall include, at a minimum, details regarding existing and proposed vegetative buffering to reduce impacts of noise off-site and provide an enhanced visual aesthetic to the site. And then it'll be C, conditions to be met during construction. 16, the town reserves the right to conduct a site inspection, so on and so forth.
Right, good.
And that actually persists past the end of construction as well. It's sort of, during construction is really the first opportunity to verify that the approved landscaping has been properly installed. But basically we continue, that sort of continues for some period into the future. But yeah, just to keep it clear what's obviously before construction and what's during and after.
Right. Hey, there was, Dave, you had something be fairly close in here somewhere?
Yeah, my first note is on 23 under conditions to be met after construction.
Yes.
So, if we're ready to start that, the wording is slightly confusing. The intent of this is the board should be notified when occupancy for active business begins, and if that occupancy is only part of the warehouse, when it expands, the board is also expecting to be notified. Is that the intent of this? In that case, the wording "if not less than the entire warehouse" kind of conflicts with that. When occupancy for active business operations exist at the facility, and if less than the entire warehouse, subsequently for the expansion of such active use. So in other words, expansion can only happen if your operations are at less than the entire warehouse.
Right.
So the word "not," I think, should be removed there to make that make sense.
We were also thinking of having this be tied to 25, so I would love if we had at least a brief amount of wording on and the current total square footage of use or something like that, in some wording that indicates that's what we're looking for in this letter, not just that we have, okay, we started some business now, it's not the whole use, but then we actually know like what square footage are we talking about.
Yep.
I don't know how we want to put that in here offhand, but that was the intent of when I mentioned this particular piece.
Now we had the 100,000 square foot. Was the threshold being used to trigger the 6-month
Yes.
monitoring?
And when I did mention to Mr. Donahue as well, and he, nodded his head and said in agreement. I forget if this was in the public hearing or after, that I wanted the board to be notified when that use level at least takes place, so that we are given the notice that 6 months from X date we should be expecting that condition to kick in.
So under condition 23, you're suggesting that we don't need to be notified if 50,000 square feet is actively occupied, not until 100,000?
I'm suggesting we don't necessarily need to. I don't think there's a big burden just to send us a letter saying that there's 50,000 square feet getting utilized. My main point is the letter that we receive should say in some form what the square footage of utilization is. Rather, where the condition as it stands right now doesn't, at least to me, read that they're required to tell us what the square footage of their utilization is. Do you believe you're following me, Chris? I know you're scrolling, but
Yeah.
you deleted the wrong word, I think.
If less than the entire warehouse for expansion of such active use. And your suggestion, Justin, is for that notification to indicate how much?
Yeah, maybe just a extra line. Notifications should include, at a minimum, the the square footage that of operations something like that. That satisfies my concern.
All right, anything else on that?
I had one on 27, if we are going to 27.
Yeah, I have several items on 25 here.
Okay.
So the first thing I have on 25 is just below list item E, a little bit farther down, Chris. Let's see, the second line, where the paragraph that starts the post-occupancy traffic studies, the line below that condition, it references condition 8, that should be condition 9.
Where's that?
Right here.
And let me see, a little bit farther down in that same paragraph, there's a reference to exhibit number 3, which for consistency with the other references to exhibit number 3 should also refer to subsequent, and you can copy the wording from above there. There's qualify exhibit 3 with subsequent revisions, etc. What else? At the bottom of that same paragraph, subject to the limitations set forth herein, such measures may include, you could use like a semicolon after herein, or a separate sentence, but the simplest thing to do would just be a semicolon there. And then the next thing I have is on 27. Does anybody else have anything on 25? Or 26?
Yeah, 25. HI. I was wondering why additional signage at the driveway would involve Mass DOT. Wouldn't it be based on our zoning bylaw?
I think that's the intention of the word if. So depending upon if it goes in the right of way, which would be Mass DOT controlled, or on the site itself, which would be site controlled. I believe most likely it would have to be, unless there's an easement for it to be on the right of way, Mass DOT will require it to be on the site, but.
Yeah, I don't know, wayfinding signage, is that signage that the applicant puts up?
Yes.
Or is that signage that Mass DOT puts up?
It could be either. So what this language is, these are the potential mitigations that if additional improvements are needed, these are.
I don't know that our sign bylaw distinguishes where the sign goes, other than not within the site triangle and all those things. In any case, I just wondered about that when I looked at it.
Anything else? Before 27?
I've got one
More
there.
input there. Okay. If you go to, can I go?
Go.
Yeah.
Oh, Can you scroll down, Chris, to well, down the second paragraph?
The 26?
27.
Second paragraph of 27, Prabhu?
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I have one in the first paragraph.
Okay.
Just one. Oh, yeah, just starting towards the end of the fourth line from the bottom. Restricted hours is estimated by one or more tenants to exceed 15 hours. I want the total estimated by all tenants to trigger the 15.
Could
See
we
what I'm
solve
saying?
that by saying to exceed 15 for entire facility?
Sounds reasonable. Can we do that, Mark?
Where?
Yes?
It's the third line up from the bottom, Chris. Or more tenants to exceed 15.
What are we adding?
To exceed 15 of the entire facility.
Well, yeah, estimated by one or more tenants
Is that
to
sufficient?
exceed 15 for, say it again, for the entire,
He wrote it out as inclusive of the entire facility.
yeah. Get that, Chris?
Yep, it's in there.
Okay, I can't. So, all right, now we both have the next one. We'll go for it.
So the one I had is where you have the, on the second paragraph, the fourth line within the brackets where you have, but excluding in all events, the whole condition was dropped. So that is not, this should not be included there. After the 6 months, it's a period, or if after 6 months, for the first 3 years. Anything within that brackets was dropped in the hours of operation discussion. We pull that up, and that was the last line. And Attorney Donahue said that we'll drop it. We'll drop that condition.
Yep. So this specifically is in terms of the hours of the restriction or the exemption, I should say, that was included previously for October 15th and January 15th of each year. That has been removed. My understanding, this is specifically looking at the traffic analysis, and that the traffic analysis would exclude the holiday months. In terms
We didn't
of
even
that
talk
being
about
noted.
this, Chris.
Yeah,
We-
if I may briefly, my understanding when I voted on this and from what Mr. Donahue had said is that we had initially proposed excluding the testing during that period because of the restriction during that period. Where and the testing is explicitly in relation to the 15 tenants throughout the tenant trips during restricted hours. So if we are not excluding that from a restriction during those months, why are we excluding it from testing during those months?
Right.
I don't feel that is appropriate based on our discussion at the meeting.
Yes, we did, right, during this one caught my eye as well, and I reviewed that portion of the meeting, and during the discussion of that, during the discussion of the allowance of exceeding the 15 during that period of that holiday period, it was also said, and it was me who said it, that because of the expectation of increased traffic during that period, it would probably not be representative of the year-round traffic to do the monitoring during that period. And subsequently, the idea of excluding that period from the limit was discarded. We never went back and addressed the question, which at the time it seemed reasonable to us and apparently to the whole board because no one pushed back on it, that the monitoring activity was perhaps not best done during this period where higher than normal traffic would be expected.
I don't know.
But
I
the
don't
question-
understand
right,
how
the
to get
question-
higher traffic.
Yeah, and it's no guarantee that, in fact, any of these activities during restricted hours would increase traffic over the holiday period. It was merely anticipated that that was possible. But the question that was left in my mind was whether, although we appeared to agree to this particular provision of avoiding monitoring during those 3 months, you know, is that something we think is still worth keeping in here?
Oh,
The exclusion?
The idea of not doing that 6-month monitoring during that holiday period.
It seems to me that you need that, you need to not have that exclusion in order to identify if they've increased during those months. Need to measure during those months.
So-
Be able-
Yeah.
Would you be suggesting requiring one of those 6-month monitoring periods during those specific 3 months? Or do we leave it up to the applicant to choose the times of the 6 months?
I'll say for my interpretation of our discussion, and I know we did not go back to this particular piece, but the removing the restriction of those 3 months from the 15 count meant to me we didn't need to exclude those 3 months, but going the other direction on the pendulum and saying now we require testing in those 3 months, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that either.
I don't think, right,
not-
and I don't think any of our discussion, any of our deliberation leading up to this decision suggested that there was a need to monitoring during those specific 3 months.
No, we're laying out, if certain things happen, then there has to be monitoring every 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's
And
all we said.
Those things can happen at any time during the year.
Yes.
This isn't adding to when that monitoring might have to be done.
And and with this wording as it's currently on the screen drafted, the person doing the monitoring could choose not to do those 3 months anyway. But I think that is a reasonable interpretation of how our discussion went prior to approving the decision.
Which is a reasonable.
I think it is mostly
What's
consistent.
drafted right now?
Mostly consistent with what we appeared to agree to at the last meeting, that leaving out that qualifier on the 6-month monitoring is in line with what we discussed last week. Now, I have another item. Are we satisfied with that now?
I don't think so. I think we might be able to get input on this question from their representative. Isn't he on here among panelists? Yes. Dave, you might want to give him a chance to comment.
Yes. Attorney Donahue, do you have any comment on this?
Well, I think I can just summarize based upon my takeaway from the meeting, which was that the concept that there wasn't a cap during the so-called holiday season was withdrawn by the applicant, but that at least one member of the board, without any objection of other members of the board, indicated that the 6-month testing would not or should not include that same period because it would not be indicative of what the traffic is. And if that's the intent, then as opposed to trying to figure out when to start and stop, I thought we'd just call it out. So what it would mean, for example, if the use began in May, that instead of testing in November, you would first test after January 15th.
I think that you ought to be able to test during that time when there might be the most likely time of year to have an excess. But all that said, I think that there are enough people unhappy enough with this and less able than even us to interpret every word here that it might be better not to have these words in the decision.
Is everybody on the board of the belief that the board did not really agree? I mean, the remark about not testing during that period was sort of made in passing. And as I said before, it was made, no one disagreed with it, but it was made in the context of having that cap lifted during that period of time. So I want to make sure that that we know that the wording says what we all believe we agreed to.
Yes, I don't think this is one of the places in particular where I didn't think, without having the actual wording spelled out on our screen, it was just too tangled through basically just verbal discussion, just to be sure of exactly what we were doing. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to have us do this way tonight, to actually have words in front of us that we can understand the meaning of, because they're written down.
Yep, so I'm going to take it as a consensus of the board that our collective understanding is that we did not all understand that monitoring would be excluded from this particular period. So removing that clause, I think, reflects the board's general understanding of what we voted on last week.
Thanks, Dave.
And if we're done on that particular portion of this condition,
I want to be sure that Mark isn't too worried about it.
I mean, at this point, without that
Well,
restriction.
that's so sweet of you to worry about my feelings. That's
Yeah.
that is a first. So,
Like, would you object to doing this?
I mean, that leaves you full discretion on when to initiate the monitoring.
it's fine. Take it out. I just want to make it clear I wasn't trying to slip something by. It was my takeaway of the discussion. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, as I said, I think that we were all pretty damn tired by then too. But just
It's fine. Take it out. Just take it out. That's fine. We'll work with it.
okay. Yes, Dave, do it.
So, this is sort of a picky mathematical thing. In the first paragraph under condition 27, we talk about the estimated traffic exceeding 15. And that would be taken as a modification of the special permit. In the second paragraph, we begin by talking about the projected number of tractor trailer trips being less than 15, triggering the reporting and the monitoring, or triggering the monitoring. The reporting is already up in the first paragraph. So, looking at it with my mathematical eye, I say, how about if it's exactly 15? Exactly 15 means it doesn't exceed 15, so it's not a modification, but it's also not less than 15, so I don't have to monitor. And I think the answer to our understanding was, if it's greater than 15, it's a modification. If it's less than or equal to 15, it gets into the monitoring. So
Sounds good.
if I'm really picky about literally interpreting these words, I can get away without monitoring if I have exactly 15. And I don't think that's what the board intended. So I think the word there should be less than or equal to 15, or else not more than 15.
Right. I don't think it's worth a whole lot of arguing. I'd just as soon we do what
Fine.
Dave says. but the estimate might be, when the estimates are made, one way or the other could be juggled. So
It's fine.
Second paragraph, Chris.
Second line, second, up. In the event that the projected number of tractor-trailer trips either entering or exiting the facility during the restricted hours is less than or equal to 15, the tenants should conduct it, et cetera, et cetera. This is a variation of the off by one error I used to say a lot in computer systems programming and operation.
almost like divide by zero.
But yeah, things like that often catch my eye. And that's all I had. Does anybody else have anything on condition 27 or anything after that?
So our motion would be to approve the decision with the edits that we've discussed tonight, would it not?
I think that would be in order.
Second.
With the chair to make sure they got in. So that's my motion.
Okay.
Second.
So with that, you're suggesting that we are close enough to the exact final
Yes.
wording to leave it up to a review by the chair to make sure that
Yes.
we've caught everything correctly.
Yes. You're the best candidate, Dave. Do this stuff well.
All right. I think I heard a second.
Yes.
Or 2 seconds.
2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds.
And I will just add, I noticed that in the posted draft, we don't have all the exhibits in yet. I just wanted to mention that explicitly since we're approving the decision language.
Yeah. And if there was any way to include a copy of the videos of the hearing in the record, I'd be really happy. But I know.
All right. So there is a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Put this to a vote. Bob.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Justin.
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We'll wrap up the last few details on the paperwork and shoot that out the door.
Thanks for your time and attention. Really appreciate it.
And thank you for all your patience again with all of us. It's been a long road, but we're one step closer to being done.
There have been other things that didn't go as well for us. You helped.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All righty. The time is now 7:58, which means it's 7:30 and time for our continuation of the public hearing on the request for a modification of a definitive plan approval for the Village at Institute Road.
Yeah, so we had some updated plans that were sent in. Looking at the phasing plan, we have the applicants and their engineers here if they want to kind of go over some of those changes in terms of the. I turn the share screen on so you're able to pull up any documents, or I can pull them up if that's easier.
Good evening, Chris, board members, Matt Bidner with Civil Design Group, here representing Pulte Homes of New England regarding this project. And Chris, if I could ask you to please pull that phasing plan up, I would appreciate that. So we were here just as a kind of a point of reference. We were here back in the end of March on the 28th, and we had requested 3 amendments to the approved definitive subdivision plan for this project. One of the requests that we had made at that meeting was to extend the timeline to complete construction. And at that meeting, the board had voted to grant an approval of a 1-year extension to the construction timeline. The other two items that we had discussed and were requesting an amendment to were driveway grades in excess of 10% on some of the lots. So 10 of the 46 lots, we had requested driveways exceeding 10%, so up to 15% as we had presented. The reason for the request was in accordance with condition A11 of the definitive approval. We were, or the approval required, the definitive approval required the planning board's approval of any driveways exceeding 10%. The approved plan set for the Village Institute Road had driveways exceeding 10%. So consistent with that plan, we have driveways over 10%, but in accordance with that condition A11, we did come before the board to officially request approval of that in accordance with that condition. And as we had presented, in addition to being consistent with the approved plans, the reason for that was on a handful of the, I'll call them uphill lots on the plan. It was sort of good engineering practice, I'll say, to have slightly steeper driveways than the 10%, so up to 15%, to minimize the cut on those lots and sort of work more in harmony with the land. So again, consistent with the approved plan, requesting the approval from the planning board, just consistent with condition A11 of the definitive approval. What was more the focus of the planning board meeting on the 28th, though, was our third request, which was a modification to the phasing plan, which is what's on the screen here. So the definitive approval included a phasing plan as sheet number 27 of the approved plan set. And we had requested a modification to that phasing plan in order to more efficiently build out the project. So in preparing the construction plans, we had reviewed the phasing plan in significant detail and identified some areas where we thought a more efficient build out could be had from what was approved in the definitive set. So this was the bulk of our discussion at the last meeting, and the planning board had identified two areas of concern on our proposed modification. The first being the length of roadway associated with the build out of the first lots of the project. So on Audrina Lane, yes. So Chris, thank you. So you're highlighting the lots there. So the concern expressed by the board was that you did not want to see more than 500 feet of roadway and the lots along that section of roadway built out. In other words, not to develop more than 500 feet of a temporary dead end of roadway. And so we've gone back and updated the plan. As you can see on the screen here tonight, phase 2 is for the first section of Audrina Lane coming off Institute Road, which is the north-south. So the vertical road on the right side of the page is Institute. So the first 500 feet of Audrina Lane and the lots along that section of Audrina Lane are what now we have revised the phasing plan to include. So no more than 500 feet of Audrina Lane to be built out, the lots along that section to be built out as part of phase 2. So we've addressed that comment. And then the other comment, which we heard loud and clear from the board, was the prioritization of the upgrades to Institute Road. And so we've updated this plan to note that phase 3, after the initial Audrina Lane 500 feet that we talked about, phase 3 is to complete the loop. So the remainder of Audrina Lane and then Brook Street back out to Institute Road is phase 3. And that will then tee us up to commence the Institute Road improvements earlier on in the phasing plan. So we understood, based on your feedback, the importance of that and getting Institute Road improvements done as soon as feasible in the timeline of construction of this project. So as discussed at the last meeting, we need to complete that loop of Audrina and Brook Street in order to then detour traffic around to then construct the improvements along Institute Road. But we have updated this plan to note the fact that phase 3 is to complete that Brook Street loop to then go right into phase 4, which includes the Institute Road improvements. And so we've updated sheet number 27, which is the phasing plan of the approved plan set. And we did submit that, an updated version of that after the last meeting. And so with that, we believe we've addressed the 2 comments that we received on this phasing plan on the 28th of March. And we believe that those were the only comments that the planning board had that indicated on this phasing plan. I would also like to note that on a parallel track, we were before the Conservation Commission with this proposed phasing plan, modified phasing plan, and we did receive their approval of this plan, both as a minor modification to the order of conditions and to the stormwater permit that they had issued for this project. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board. Happy to answer any questions and would respectfully request the board's approval of this modified phasing plan.
So,
Thank you.
Bob, yeah.
Yeah. Institute Road. The previous plan required it to be done before development of most of those. You've pushed it back. As this thing is drawn, you could have almost all the houses built, except for those in the purple, before you do anything to Institute Road. I and others fought pretty hard about the Institute Road work. And I'm not happy with it. I will say that I could see on the southern end of Brook Street that you could do the same thing or something similar to what you're doing on Adriana Lane. That is, you could build whatever, half a dozen or so houses at the beginning of that. We could, I think it would be okay to say you could build like a half a dozen there, but then Institute Road has to be done before the rest of that is done.
Chris, could I ask you to, thank you for that feedback. Could I ask you, Chris, to please advance to the next slide? So this is a side-by-side, in an effort to address that comment. I appreciate that comment. And we weren't part of the initial approval of the project. But what I can say is that we had felt that based on what was approved, which is the left-hand side of the screen here, that's what was approved as part of the definitive plan. That's the approved phasing plan. And on the right side is what we're currently proposing here tonight. We had felt that based on the feedback from March 28th, and again, we heard you loud and clear on the priority of the Institute Road improvements. We had felt that what we had modified the plan to for tonight's hearing, which is on the right side, was actually consistent with what was approved. So we had felt that we had gone back to what was approved. So on the left side there, you can see that Institute was part of that that same phase that developed those lots in orange. So I will say that we are requesting that the first 500 feet of Audrina be able to be constructed as proposed. But the remainder thereafter of those orange lots on our plan on the right side, we had felt that that was actually consistent with what was approved by the planning board.
The point of the Institute Road is that you're adding a lot of traffic there and creating, more traffic. And there are, if we zoom down in, there are issues about width of the road and all of that sort of thing, which go to safety. If you have all those houses built before you start working on it, I think it's a problem.
Yeah, I have a couple of hands up. Justin and then Chris.
Sure. So, just to say, this is probably more for Bob than anyone. I wasn't on the board during the initial approval of this subdivision, but my skim of the decision and my look at this presentation with the phasing plan changes, it does look like the Institute Road is basically on the same phase as what we were doing before. Was there something that I missed in the decision that said specifically Institute Road needed to be done before any of those lots that I'm not seeing? Like I understand where the concern was, but the way I'm looking at it is from what was the decision actually, rendered as. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Can I ask Chris to weigh in here?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look back at the specific language that was in the original decision to confirm, but I think in either way, as a somewhat of a belt and suspenders approach to capture that intent, if the applicant is amenable, I think it could be addressed with a condition attached to this modification stating that no occupancy permit for lots included in phase 4 or 5 shall be issued prior to completion of the road work as proposed on Institute Road. That would allow them to construct the units, but in terms of actually allowing them to be occupied, and which would generate the traffic being discussed, that Institute Road work would have to be completed.
Yeah,
That would, I think, do what I want. I was willing to be a little bit more accommodating in saying that we might be able to allow whatever the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 or whatever it is, lots on the whatever southern leg out by Institute Road.
it would probably be worthwhile to review the existing approval to see what, if anything, it said about the extent to which Institute Road must be completed before the other work in that same phase is completed.
There may have been some understandings in all of our lengthy discussions also that I've mentioned that often a project gets transferred to somebody else and they don't remember what took place before they got there, in terms of conversations. In any case, I'm happy with what Chris outlined.
Mr. Chairman, Bob, if I may, this is
Yes.
Mark Mastriani from Pulte Homes. I'd like to see if I can just share some information on our proposed sequence of events, construction events, and then see if we can find a happy medium that isn't exactly what Chris just suggested, but might be a fallback position and in a position that we can live with that works for us and might give the planning board a little bit more assurance. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of walk through, our hopes, Pulte Homes hopes right now and our goals. So our goal is to hopefully wrap up this discussion with the planning board tonight and ultimately have the phasing plan, the revised phasing plan approved. And that would allow us to continue with wrapping up our construction plans and continue with the bidding out process of the site contractor and allow us to really get under construction, in the next 60 to 90 days, close on the land with Mr. Alfonso, and get under construction and we'll say June. And that's important for time frame because what we'd really like to do is when we get under construction in June, we'd be able to do a lot of the site work that needs to be done and get it done in a timely manner where we can really work on the site stabilization before the weather turns, and we'd be able to stabilize the site in the fall. And then the other goal is to get Audrina Lane and those utilities in, and it paved before the plant shut down in late fall, right, early winter. And with that, once we get Audrina Lane paved and utilities in, we'd be able to start building houses through the winter on that phase 1 or phase 2 section on the colored map. And then during the winter, we'd really focus on the Brook Street, completing the remaining roadway and the utilities of Brook Street so that we could complete the loop through the winter. And then when the plant open again in the spring of May 2023, we would be able to pave Brook Street and open up those lots. And I say that, and so now that Brook Street the loop is completed, our site contractor would then move into Institute Road. We wouldn't want to send him home and have them go away to another site. So the next natural progression would be to then work on the off-site improvements of Institute Road. And there is some timing restrictions in the order of conditions because it's near the vernal pool. So the right time to do Institute Road and the improvements is really late spring, early summer, and summer of 2023. And that's when we fully intend to do it. So the problem with what Chris suggested is we'll be long done with Audrina Lane and those 8 lots that are up there. And what doesn't work for us in today's environment, especially in today's environment, is sending our concrete crews home and our framers home and all of the subs that we have on the site. We want this to be a successful project and we want to comply with the planning board's decision and we want to work with the town. But what we are trying to avoid with this phasing plan is building some homes on Audrina and then being stopped and then being stopped and then having to pick back up in 3 or 4 months later, whatever the time frame is. So what we're asking to do is just really progress in a natural fashion and just keep building along Audrina and then down Brook in an efficient and an orderly manner. And at the same time, what our phasing plan has shown and what we're committing to is that we're going to complete Audrina Lane and then complete the loop to Brook Street out back to Institute Road. And then we would do the off-site Institute Road improvements. And we felt and feel that we understand that this is really important to the board and to the town. And we're aware of that commitment and we're intending to comply with that commitment. And we also do feel that this phasing plan that we're presenting is consistent with the decision that is valid and that we're intending to comply with, and is consistent with the previous phasing plan that you see before you, where the lots were the same color as Institute Road. So, as sort of a false, what Chris suggested that none of the yellow homes, the phase 4 homes are can be occupied. That would really, I think that would really hurt us. What I would offer to the board is somewhere in the middle. So, right now, the way the phasing plan is, the purple lots come after Institute Road. And I think that's consistent with the previous decision. So there's 13 lots. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's actually 12 purple lots. So those in this scenario are tied to the Institute Road requirements being completed. And what I'd like to offer to the board is maybe, adding another 10 lots to that. So if you look to the southern yellow lots of Brook Street, once you get to Dillon Way, so like lots 1 through 5 and 42 through 45, those are the ones coming off of Institute that go to Dillon Way. And then of course, 46, that's off of Institute Road. So if the board would restrict those or say those lots can't be occupied until Institute Road is complete, as well as the purple lots. That's 22 lots that are restricted, and that would allow us to continue to build in an efficient manner, give the board the protections and really, and allow us to really do Institute Road next late spring, summer when it really wants to be done. And that would all work really well. And we hope you'd consider that.
Any
You're
comments from the board?
saying continue development from the blue on Adrena Lane and coming around the corner,
Yeah.
some fair ways, and not do any of the development on down to the southern intersection.
Not doing any of the lots development past like Dillon Way.
Chris?
So I just want to clarify and make sure I'm understanding the discussion as well. So what I was kind of suggesting is a condition that would allow Adrenal Lane to be built and occupied, constructed and occupied. That includes the houses and the road. Then Brook Street would be constructed. In the next phase, all of the units in phase 4 could be constructed, but not occupied until Institute Road is being completed. If I'm understanding, you're asking for the occupancy to be allowed for some of the, but not all of the units in phase 4. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, just the blue lots that would really hurt us. And I'm just that wouldn't really work for us. Asking to add, half of the yellow lots in. And I think we're actually going further and giving the board more protection than what already exists. But I know we're here and we're asking for a revised phasing plan. So I know that's what, that's this discussion and why we're having it. So I'm just I just don't want to agree to something that I know really hurts us. And doesn't, it'll hurt the potential of success of the project. I know that. So I'm trying to find a way to hear your comments and respond appropriately. I'm trying to give the board the comfort that Institute Road is important and is going to be completed as soon as we can get to it, which I explained previously, while at the same time, giving my company the ability to build enough homes so that we don't have to stop, because stopping is a problem.
So, but that's where I just want to make clear that it's not the construction; those would be tied to the actual occupancy, which means the sale and occupancy of those units. You could still construct them.
It's just hard building a bunch of homes and queuing them all up with all these homeowners who want to move in, and you're selling homes and telling them all this stuff that has to be done, and they're just sitting out, and and they're sitting out there for an abnormal long period of time waiting for this to be done. it would be better for me and for the project if, all of those yellow houses weren't tied like that.
Understood.
Bob had made the comment that but certainly occupancy for the houses that were just coming off of Institute Road in the yellow section up into, say, Dillon Way could be built and occupied.
Yeah, so I heard that. I guess the order of construction that really wants to happen is to complete the loop and to continue going in a counterclockwise direction, based on utilities. So, it's that would be, and it's also like when you're completing a section, you want to keep completing the roadway as you go, and then the construction keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed into a corner. And so if we completed one section of Adrena and then completed another section of Brook Street on the opposite side of the project, it wouldn't really flow as well as working in an orderly manner counterclockwise and working your way through the project and stabilizing and finishing as you go.
You just said continuing the development around progressively, and what you said, I think, was including Brooks Street as you came around. If you have to wait till you come with most of the houses built before you complete Brook Street, that's not where I'm going.
Oh, no, I misspoke then. Brook Street will be complete. Brook Street utilities and up to Binder Co. has to be complete before we build on any of those lots, is my understanding. And that's, that's phase 3 on our plan. And that's, I think we're in alignment there.
Yeah, I want to see a way that we're assured that you actually do get Institute Road done early on, like early on in the whatever that is, yellow phase, not at the end of it. And maybe Justin has an idea.
Justin.
So my thoughts along with this and with what Bob has been saying, and kind of middle ground between what Chris has also said, is when I count the lots that you have associated with phase 2, there's 8 lots there, according to my count. If I'm miscounting, feel free to correct me. But where I was thinking is we could do essentially Chris's condition with the with the language that allows occupancy up to an additional 8 lots associated with phase 4, or 10 lots if we so chose, which is closer to what Bob was saying for the southern lots, but let the choice of which lots get occupancy permits be up to the developer. That way the process on which lots you build will be up to you guys, as long as we still meet the desire of the board to have Institute Road completed relatively early in the process, not necessarily even halfway through, where you were saying initially, having 10 lots set aside in addition to the 13 in phase 5, where I'm saying having 8 to 10 out of the 26 lots of phase 4 set as able to be occupied before Institute Road is done.
That's pretty good. I don't care which, as long as Brook Street is complete, so that we don't have our dead end road issue. Then I don't care which of the yellow lots get developed. You might want to do every other house and then come back and fill in. I whatever works. But that's okay as far as I'm concerned. We can do something along those lines.
I just jump in because I'm sorry to cut anybody off, but Justin, I think that's a fantastic suggestion, and I think it would work for us. Since you said 8 to 10, I'd love to take 10.
What have thought?
So So the idea there
So
would
anyways,
be,
I'll throw that out there that, if we're heading in that direction, I think that we could work with that.
so the
I think-
idea, am I understanding the idea here would be regarding phase 4 that up to 10 occupancy permits can be issued prior to the completion of Institute Road?
Yeah,
that
I would phrase it as not more than 10 units, but yes, that's I think the intent.
Off by one.
Of phase 4's buildable lots. And I'm wording it that way because we have 8 on phase 2 that I don't want to restrict the developer to saying, well, then now we only have 2 more. That's not the intent of what I'm proposing here.
No, I'm saying specifically with regard to the phase 3 lots, or phase 4, excuse me. With regard to phase 4, up to 10 of the phase 4, or not more than 10 of the phase 4 lots can be issued occupancy permits prior to the completion of the Institute Road improvements.
Linda,
That would be in addition to the Adrena, the phase 2 lots.
Linda wants to talk.
Hey,
Yes.
just one thing I wanted to point out I'm sure the developer has thought about this, but, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not terribly worried about how quickly they're going to get Institute Road done, because all that traffic going through Brook Street and Adrena Lane is going to be awful. It's all the traffic that uses Institute coming through there and doing that little loop. There's going to be a pain in the butt to them anyway. So it's going to behoove the developer to get Institute Road open as soon as possible.
I think they know that.
Yeah.
But I think that the formulation that we've got would be good, and if we can nail it down, we can declare victory and move on.
No, I think we're pretty sensitive to the fact that that's not ideal, is to have traffic routed around through that development, even under development, because you've got trucks coming and going and all kinds of stuff happening. And yeah.
Well, the trucks are going to be coming and going until they get all the houses built.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the traffic counts on Institute Road. But I don't think we have to worry about that. I think we have.
Nope, it's his problem.
We have
Developers.
I think probably at this point, it seems like we've identified several incentives for the Institute Road work to be completed started next summer, hopefully completed. I don't know what the expected time frame beginning to end is going to be, but the sooner they can start, the sooner they can get it done. So there's that, just the scheduling and scheduling the paving contracts and everything. There is the traffic situation Linda just mentioned, and there is what I think we've converged on is the idea of in phase 4, no more than 10 occupancy permits until Institute Road is completed.
Yeah.
So, are we good with that?
I'm good with it. Do we need to keep the hearing open until we have something specific?
I don't think so.
Well, there's the plan that's on paper and in the file isn't the same as you're talking about approving.
Yep.
Isn't it though?
Since this is a public hearing, I don't want to close without asking if there is any comment from the public.
Just before we take that, am I misremembering, or did we have the question of the non-minor modification idea of deadline?
So that section was bifurcated and voted on at the previous meeting. But in order to keep the paperwork clean, that'll be included in the decision, but the board has already acted on that.
Double checking, thank you.
Yep.
I don't see any hands raised in the room or on Zoom.
Could I clarify the decision or the letter that hopefully will be, approving the plans and the extension? That will be a minor modification, and I'm just asking that so that is there an appeal period? Is this a minor plan change?
No, it is a full modification.
Okay.
Yes, so the board will have to issue a decision on the modification of the definitive plan. And per the usual procedure, we would expect to have the draft decision ready for the board to review in 2 weeks. And barring any unforeseen circumstances, it should be formally issued the next day.
And are we holding the hearing open so we can receive appropriate paperwork, plan, wherever the phasing plan, or do we need to do that?
So the phasing plan that was presented tonight has been submitted. I don't think there's a harm to keep the hearing open, but there's, I'm not sure if there's a benefit on the other side either.
I don't know that we are expecting to receive any additional information other than the draft decision.
Okay.
And
Then I move we close the hearing.
Second.
moved and seconded that this hearing be closed, and I assume staff be directed to draft a decision.
Yes, I'm sure I said that.
I heard it. I swear I did.
I seconded that.
So any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
Justin.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Chris will have this all written up for us. You'll have it done by noon tomorrow, I'm sure, but our meeting isn't until for another couple of weeks.
When is your next meeting, sir?
2 weeks from tonight.
April 25th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you. And
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
we'll get this out as quickly as we can.
Okay. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good
thanks.
luck.
Alrighty. So we've got a few other agenda items to circle back to. Under discussion items, we have a hazard mitigation plan update.
Yes, so we did receive our final draft hazard mitigation plan. So that was included in the meeting materials. I like to give my boards a little bit of a heads up, and so I'll also be sending this into the select board prior to our final steps. There will be the 2-week public comment period, so we'll have after I meet with the select board, we'll publish that 2-week period for public comments to be received, and then barring that, if there's no additional edits that are received that are need to be made, we can then submit to MEMA for their final review and approval, and then once that's successful, we will have our final updated hazard mitigation plan. So that plan is the product of lots of work at the staff level with volunteers and public engagement included. So we've been updating that, and it's a very thorough document. I think it sets us up for not only the grant funding, but it also included a really good review of where we are in terms of addressing hazards that could come up. So feel free to take a look at that, and I'll obviously let the board know again once we have that public comment period set up, but still want to meet with the select board first.
Any questions or comments on that? All right, next item is the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. Anything new on that?
So nothing specifically new. The application for funding was submitted, and we're waiting to hear back, kind of finalizing the contract documents at the staff level. So although we can't guarantee, I do anticipate that project will be funded, and we will be moving forward with development of that prioritization plan through this summer. That's all I had on that.
Any questions, comments? All right, our next discussion item is proposed zoning articles.
Yep. So, per the comments of the board at the last meeting, we looked at the deadlines. I know that we've been kind of having pretty heavy agendas and have not really gotten through the preliminary proposals for these. Looking at the deadlines, we have gone past the required timeline to submit notice in the newspaper and to have our public hearing and meet the subsequent deadlines. So we will not be able to have those zoning articles on the upcoming Springtown meeting. The timeline was just too short. So I will be moving those to the fall. I do want to take this as an opportunity, I think, during the spring and through the summer to really kind of hash these out a little bit more. Take our time with it, per the board's kind of discussion, and develop a little bit more public engagement and public support. Some of them are fairly simple. Some of them I think could benefit from a little bit of additional input. We don't have to go through those presentations tonight, but that's the intent.
So Justin had his hand up, and then I see Bob's hand. Justin?
Yep. My only comment is on the section 5.10 draft article you have. Can we make the next time this gets brought up to the board have a different text color for the added text rather than red? The way my brain has been trained over several years, red just looks like deleted and removed text that made me have to reread this multiple times than I felt was worth it. But it's a minor note, but it has big impact for me.
Yeah, we can definitely change that.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the presentations, the presentation slides, I'll just note that taken out of context, I haven't presented those formally, and I think hopefully I would be able to provide more context in the of what the slides are showing. I use the slides more as a tool, and I think the presentation is where that comes through. But duly noted.
Dave,
Bob?
while we're on talking about the 5.10 proposed changes, I emailed Chris today with an interest or concern or what have you. We've been seeing in the news, in the papers recently, that I guess the legislature is considering making a change in the law regarding on-site consumption. And I would like to be sure that we know where we stand. We have a mention that it's not allowed at one point, but that legislation that's been discussed in the press involves an approval by the select board. And I haven't seen anything involving zoning for that. This is zoning. And I want to be sure that we know where the town stands currently with our current rules and with any proposed changes here on that usage. I think we should perhaps be defining the usage, and we might have a line in the use table, and we might have no's in all the columns, or we might have no's except for the two zones that we currently allow other types of other types of marijuana activity. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So
No.
so I think one of the situations here. I mean, the intent of this zoning update is really, the regulations have evolved from when they initially came out at the CCC level, and there's a lot of other kind of authorities that are all involved in these regulations. And so with all those processes as they evolve, as the terms change, I think, it behooves us to update and to meet those. So that's where I think, I think we were somewhat at a good point that we could have moved forward in the spring had we had the timeline able to be met. But I think between now and the fall town meeting, I think that's where looking at this and capturing, the regulations as they are changed, anything else that we can capture and update in the fall, I think it behooves us to kind of modernize these regulations to meet the current context, and that's still the intent.
I'm really concerned about not having that type of use covered in zoning beside all the other types of use that we do have. My recollection is, my sense was that I couldn't find, I don't remember anybody who really was in favor of on-site consumption. And I'm sufficiently concerned about what I've been reading in the paper that I'd really like to find out where we stand now, and then really beyond this. We're not going to get it. We're not going to be sure that we're ahead of the situation for the Springtown meeting, but I would like us to get rolling on that question.
Yeah, we'll have to pay attention to what the legislature does and does not do, and what the CCC does and does not do. It's somewhat of a moving target. I know with the latest draft suggested changes, more of those ended up being alignment with the merger of the DPH and CCC regulations than it did with accommodating delivery.
Yeah, well, this isn't delivery.
Yep, and I'll
now
echo what Bob's saying.
Right now, as Bob is saying, we're now looking at the legislature apparently seriously contemplating enabling on-site consumption, which is a whole other topic area, which I don't off the top of my head. I think we may mention that somewhere in section 5.10, but I don't.
We have it in text. We don't have it in the use table, and we don't have it in the definitions, I believe.
I think there's little, if anything, now addressing that, and we want to try to anticipate, and at least be prepared for whatever comes down on us.
Yeah, my echo from Bob is just that I think it would benefit us to see where the law goes, and then if we are not mandated by some aspect of the law to allow it, to make sure that we're not by omission or or something along those lines in our regulations, then also allowing it due to the new definitions on the state level. That's where I think we need to be aware of it. Be deliberate.
I'd like to be ahead of the curve as much as we can, as much as our opportunities to make changes are available, and not just sit back and wait. I thought we had, maybe it's the text I mentioned, but I thought at the time we felt we were covering this base and saying on-site is not permitted. And it certainly should come down to a special permit at the very least. But we need to do what we were saying in order to get there. Prabhu is blinking in and out.
Yeah,
It's the internet. It's buffering here for some reason.
it looks interesting.
Okay, anyway, that was my thing.
Okay, anything else on the proposed zoning articles? If not, our next discussion item is master plan update.
Yep. So we did receive the one proposal for that. I don't know if the board has had a opportunity to review it. I'm still setting up a time to go through the evaluation criteria that we had. I think that's still a useful exercise, but what would be helpful is in terms of, I think the major question is, do we want to move forward with the one proposal that we saw and recommend to the select board that they choose that, or do we want to recommend that we kind of relook at that process and
So
re-advertise?
you're saying that we only got one proposal and that the closing date has come?
Yes, so there was one proposal. CMRPC did issue a proposal that's within the budget. I'm highly confident in CMRPC's ability to conduct this work, and so we certainly could move forward with that recommendation to the select board. However, it's one proposal, so if if that's not amenable to the planning board, then we'll have to kind of re-strategize.
Yeah, as
Well, I have to say, being the chairman of the commission and all, that I'm well aware of its capabilities and what it's been doing. And I'm not sure, since I have that role, whether I should be saying something here. But given everything that we've heard, I would say, let's go with it.
And
Yep. Well, as I've said before, I would have liked to have received 3 proposals. Would give me more confidence that we're picking the best candidate for the job. But as I also recall, one of the roadblocks, or one of the issues that may have precluded some potential proposers from submitting a proposal, is that the funding was split. So the initial funding was not enough for the whole job, and I sensed that there was a reluctance on the part of some parties to bid, to offer us a proposal with the uncertainty of the funding. That said, I've read through the CMRPC proposal and I'm comfortable with it. I think the proposal is credible, and it proposes. I think one of the most important parts to me was a strong community engagement component, and they at least, I don't have a good sense of CMRPC's capabilities in that area, having worked with them on just one plan so far, and that's the open space and recreation plan. That did not go as well as as my 2020 hindsight tells me it could have gone. Both on the town side, we had staff changes throughout that 5 years of working on it, and CMRPC had staff changes, so that basically made the job more difficult all the way around. And I'm not going to hold that against CMRPC. I know that they're generally they're good. They have a lot of staff with strengths in these areas. So while I would have liked to have seen more competitive proposing on this, I also want to see the master plan update get done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so,
And
Bob,
the
this
sooner
is-
we can start work on it, the better.
as a quick question, and I'll preface this as saying, speaking only as your personal experience, just to make that clear, do you believe this CMRPC has the headspace to tackle more than 4 master plans at once? Because in their proposal document, they do say they are in the process of 4 of them currently.
You asking me or?
Yes, and just in your experience over the time, including at CMRPC, but as speaking as yourself.
I think as chair of the executive committee, we hear reports from the executive director and the heads of the different departments, including the one that would be doing this. And it's about as strong as I could imagine. The engagement, the public engagement business, that's a big deal up there for all of what they're doing these days. And a lot of energy gets put into that, well beyond a lot of the factors, you know, they have to deal with, say, Worcester, for example, where you have a lot of disadvantage. And that's not the right term, but a lot of languages, you know, all sorts of different factors that they're on top of and doing a lot with. I'm pretty confident there. Apparently, the hard thing to do these days is for anybody, including CMRPC, to hire all the people they want. There aren't a lot of candidates out there, but that doesn't affect just CMRPC. I think CMRPC is getting to be a place that if I were studying planning, say it, where is it, Clark? Or,
WPI.
yeah. Oh, maybe WPI. I don't know about planning, but there are, I think, postgraduate programs around Worcester and out to UMass, and I think that's a strength for CMRPC. I think a good many of the students there can find benefit in coming and getting their experience at CMRPC. I'd just say, let's go with it.
It sounds like the board is generally in agreement that we want to get this going, and we are sufficiently comfortable with CMRPC to go with them.
Do we need a vote?
If we wanted to, I think it would be beneficial if the board voted to direct staff to issue a letter recommending CMRPC to the select board.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Bob?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Justin?
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Consider it done. Before Prabhu has to leave us at 9 o'clock, under general business, we have some bills to be approved.
Move we approve them.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Bob?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Justin?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We
I
have
move we
no minutes of
approve.
previous meetings.
I approve as drafted the minutes of previous meeting.
I don't think we have any minutes on our.
Right, I
got
couldn't see
posted
any
at the last
minutes.
minute.
Well, it's on the agenda.
Easy to approve then.
Yes.
Draw the motion.
All righty. Just to skip down and then back. Anybody see anything in correspondence that caught their eye?
No.
This was the shortest list of correspondence I have seen in my 3 years here. Just 3 pages.
And we have a staff report.
Yep, so I did receive today some updated warrant language for the mill redevelopment. This also will be pushed to the fall, but similarly, I mean, I think that this process has been reviewed, so, but if we want to take one last look at it, I'll take a review as well, and throughout here until the fall, we'll kind of finalize this as well and have this for fall town meeting, but I think we're at the finish line.
But
Any questions or comments on that one? Anything else for staff report, Chris?
No.
All right, any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
well, I encourage. I think Natalia said copied out the announcement about the CMRPC Vision 20 whatever.
Vision
50s.
2050.
Yeah, I'd say take an interest in that. Participate. That's setting directions for our whole region over the next considerable number of years. And you might be able to see some examples of public outreach and all that we just talked about, in the way they do things. They're giving that a real push into how they do that.
Anything else? Are there any other items which may lawfully come before the board?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. We are adjourned.